Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. On behalf of Islamabad Policy Institute, I formally welcome you all to today's webinar titled Back Channel Talks and India-Pakistan Relations. Today's event, today's event is taking place in the backdrop of the quiet diplomacy taking place between Pakistan and India, as it provides an opportunity to evaluate meaningful of bilateral ties, progress made thus far, and chart broad contours for the future. The event will bring together perspectives from diplomacy and security to evaluate the future of Pakistan-India relations. Speakers will make actionable recommendations for the government. With this brief introduction, I would request Executive Director of Islamabad Policy Institute, Professor C. Sajjad Bukhari, to deliver his welcome and introductory remarks. Professor C. Sajjad Bukhari is the founder of Islamabad Policy Institute. He is currently heading IPI as its Executive Director. Over to you, sir.
General Asif Yasin Malik, Ambassador Maliha Lodi, Ambassador Abdul Basir, esteemed guests, friends and colleagues, Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all to today's panel discussion at Islamabad Policy Institute on the recent developments in relation with India. I understand that the topic is of great interest for the think tank community as well as the general public, especially after the recent background briefing for media, in which the existence of that channel was acknowledged. We are today very lucky to have eminent foreign policy practitioners, Ambassador Maliha Lodi and Ambassador Abdul Basir, with us to deliberate on this development. General Asif Yasin Malik, who had an outstanding career in the military and understands the way military diplomacy operates, is moderating this session. I wish to thank you all for sparing your precious time. Ladies and gentlemen, India-Pakistan relations during the past couple of months witnessed quiet but significant developments, starting with agreement between Director Generals of Military Operations of the two armies in late February, whereby both sides recommitted to the 2003 ceasefire understanding along the LOC. Equally significant is that no breach has been reported afterwards. From the way things have progressed since then, it looks the back channel is targeting now to break the impasse in the relationship that has been witnessed since the illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir by India in August 2019. United Arab Emirates has claimed to have facilitated the initiation of the process, while Pakistan has repeatedly, during the past few months, expressed its willingness to engage with India. It has been emphasized on New Delhi that they have to create a conducive environment for forward movement. Pakistan has been demanding reversal of India's illegal action of August 5, restoring the autonomous status of occupied Kashmir, removal of restriction on the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and seizing the process for the demographic change in the occupied valley. Ladies and gentlemen, back channel talks by their very nature are discreet and give both sides plausible deniability. However, they are suited for finding a way forward for resolution of the complicated problems which could not be resolved to normal diplomacy. In fact, the key officials and stakeholders in Pakistan and India are engaged. It is a positive step in itself. However, these talks should not be for the sake of the talks. They need to be action and result oriented. Pakistan has already shown good faith by agreeing. Pakistan has already shown good faith by agreeing to the ceasefire understanding along the LOC at the time when India is under strategic pressure in Ladakh. Meanwhile, we must be cognizant of the fact that the onus of forward movement lies on India. It is the Indian side which has to make demonstrable steps to indicate that it is genuinely committed to the talks and progress in bilateral relationship with Pakistan. The record of Modi regime, however, fails to inspire much confidence. During the past 8 years, Prime Minister Modi and his Hindutva government has attempted to exploit every possible opportunity to bring diplomatic pressure on Pakistan. In such a scenario, can their indication of addressing even some of the Pakistani concerns be trusted? Finally, before making commitments to New Delhi officials and stakeholders in Pakistan, there is the need to take these segments of society in Pakistan and Kashmir into confidence. A domestic dialogue on contour and trajectory of India-Pakistan relationship, particularly the Kashmir dispute, needs to be initiated at the earliest. In parallel, a dialogue with the people of Kashmir on both sides of the LOC needs to be commenced to ascertain their views. With this, I look forward to hearing from our esteemed speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your comprehensive welcome remarks. Now I would like to introduce our worthy chair and panelists for today's event. Our distinguished chair for today's event is Lieutenant General retired Asif Yasin Malik, who is a former Defense Secretary of Pakistan. General Malik was bestowed the privilege of creating the American NDU's Alumni Hall of Fame in 2013, the first Pakistani to have this honor. He writes and delivers lectures on geostrategic, chaotic, and political issues of the region. Then moving to the brief introduction of our worthy panelists. Our first panelist for today's webinar is Her Excellency Dr. Malika Lodi. She is a Pakistani diplomat, international relations expert, editor, and author. She has served as ambassador of Pakistan to the United Nations, United States, and the United Kingdom. Our other panelist for the event is His Excellency Ambassador Abdul Basit. Ambassador Abdul Basit is a seasoned diplomat and author. He has previously served as Ambassador of Pakistan to Germany and High Commissioner of
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a privilege and honor to be here, moderating a panel comprising of the two most distinguished diplomats with whom I have had the personal privilege of working and knowing them. Dr. Saba, I am honored that you are on this panel, and so is Basit Saab. The topic is, I think, very interesting, and I think it is the hottest topic today after COVID, probably. And there's a lot that can be said, and there's a lot that can be assumed in on this topic. In the recent days and weeks, most analysts and commentators appear to be excited on prospects of peace on the Indo-Pakistan front. Every related and unrelated happening and activity will somehow be tagged as a step towards strengthening of Indo-Pakistan relations. The communication between the DGMOs seemed like a earth shaker, whereas it was just a reiteration of Pakistan's unilateral ceasefire in General Musharraf's time. So there was a lot of UN halabu about it. But we should not forget the backdrop of that ceasefire reiteration. Basically, the Indian armed forces were under a lot of pressure because whereas they were shelling civilian population, Pakistani retaliation was on military targets, including the downing of the two aircraft in 2019. So therefore, it was not that it was out of the blue. The Indians were under pressure, and we, in any case, we look for peace on the border. I think the important thing is not the talks themselves. We must understand the important thing is the peace between India and Pakistan. Talks are an instrument of that peace, and it's a conventional instrument, nothing important. Even North Korea and United States were talking behind closed doors. So therefore, I think the emphasis should be on peace with India. And as I understand, peace has different connotations for Pakistan and India. For Pakistan, it embodies an honorable existence with independence, policy pursuance, space, and rights. It means freedom without limits, restrictions or strings, and equal rights on regional and global mosaic. For India, peace means a regional hegemonic position with rights to bully right, left, and center, while behaving like superpowers, which it is not, overruling norms and conventions in case of smaller countries in the region. These are two extremely divergent, particularly in the backdrop of repeated declarations by numerous Indian leaders that concept of Mahabharata has to be reverted and all territories separated in 1947 be annexed to fall into it by hook or by crook. Therefore, such peace may cost Pakistan's very existence and has no space for its survival as an independent sovereign state if that is the pattern of peace that Indians, and Modi has never hidden it. Ajit Doval is on record saying that Pakistan has to be divided and so on and so forth. Coming to the present environment, there are a lot of external pulls and pushes are being exerted on Pakistan to accept an unconditional peace with India, particularly in the context of its stance on Kashmir, especially with reference to the present Holocaust-like environment after 5th August. All these pulls and pushes are almost all aimed at Pakistan to accept the so-called peace at all costs. The Sino-Indian skirmishes in the last 2 years are also a factor in India's effort to ask all its friends to leverage Pakistan in cooling down the Western Front, thus allowing India to tackle the perceived Chinese threat. In this context, the Indians are mistaken that Pakistan is a factor in their military equation with Chinese. India will never be able to meet the ever-growing Chinese visionary politico-military influence as well as the resultant goodwill in the larger Afro-Asia. The final factor remains the Pakistani response to Indian ceasefire violations, which I have already brought out, that it was causing uh, harm to the Indians and restrictions on Pakistan because we could not afford any civilian Kashmiri casualties, which were Muslims and they were Kashmiris with whom we are supporting. On the other side, the Arab countries are trying to cash the direct as well as indirect economic leverage that they have on Pakistan. This again has two dimensions, regional and global. Regionally, the Love Israel policy can best be pursued if India is also on board, and in this context, construction of grand Hindu mandir in UAE, and I don't know how far it is true, the announcement to teach Ramayana and Mahabharata in Saudi Arabia are two glaring examples of this appeasement policy. It is part of this appeasement policy that the Gulf countries are pressurizing Pakistan to capitulate and accept peace with India on her terms or at best neutral terms. On the global front, the Gulf states are contributing to the Western design to prop up India as a counterbalance to increase balance to the increasing Chinese influence in the region. Coercing Pakistan to bow to Indian conditionalities will be a major achievement in this direction for which the Arabs expect to earn goodwill in the West, particularly from the United States. I will just enumerate few points as a way forward. Pakistan should remain steadfast in its stance on Kashmir. This is not the price for peace. All hindrances to the execution of CPEC projects must be removed and such works completed as soon as possible. Pakistan must walk an extra mile in contributing to establishment of peace in Afghanistan. Our economy must pick up sooner than later so as to make dividends of trade with India a lesser pressure on the government of Pakistan. A mass media campaign has to be launched to educate the public against the propaganda favoring peace at all costs with India. Finally, we have to create favorable conditions for allowing our growers to export their products. Serious efforts are to be made in the domain of foreign policy, not only to meet the aforementioned problems vis-a-vis pressures on Pakistan from various global and regional players, to understand our perspective on various issues with India. Overall, I think there is a lot of requirement to educate Pakistani public as to what is this process going to lead to. There is a very clear division in the public opinion about these talks. And we also must be wary why these talks are being held, and we should have certain questions on these talks. Uh, do the Indians expect us to leave the Kashmir issue? Will they stop the fifth generation warfare in Pakistan? Will they stop their negative role in Afghan peace process and overall environment in Afghanistan? Will they stop opposing on the world fora like FATF, Pakistan's removal from the grey list, and selective dimension of peace instead of a wholesome, comprehensive peace environment which will benefit both the countries. With these few points, I will now leave it to the experts and request Dr. Malia Sahiba to kindly give her verdict. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to join all of you. And I want to thank IPI for asking me to speak on this very crucial and as as you said, General Saab, this very urgent, if you like, urgent issue in the context of recent, well, if not developments, but certainly recent briefings. It's a pleasure to see Abdul Basit. Of course, the two of us have served together in London, and I'm a great admirer of his diplomatic work. So with that, let me turn to your, I hope I'm unmuted. Yes, I am. So you can hear me, right?
Yes, loud and
Right.
clear.
Okay, so, the topic that you wanted us to focus on is what's happening on the back channel and what is back channel diplomacy, leading to, etc. But I think we need to discuss this in a much broader context and consider how we should conduct our relations with India in a more general sense, because this remains, of course, our top foreign policy challenge. So I think four aspects of the regional environment have to be kept in view. So let me quickly flag these. One, of course, the situation created by India in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, since it took the fateful and illegal action on August 5, 2019 to formally annex Kashmir, and then, of course, impose even harsher repression to silence the voices of resistance there. And the kind of brutality that has been seen in denying medical facilities and services to citizens as they confront the crisis that the whole world is confronting, the coronavirus crisis, the health crisis, the fact that there are many jailed Kashmiri leaders who have absolutely no access to any kind of medical help, much less help, because some of them, I believe there were reports only yesterday, some of them are afflicted and have contracted the virus. So, I mean, nothing has changed there. I think we need to keep that in view. Secondly, I think within India itself, I think we're watching the ravages that have been wrought by the pandemic and the ongoing crisis there, which has subjected the Modi government to unprecedented criticism and in fact shaken it, something that had not happened in the same way before on any other issue. So this challenge to the BJP government, this weakening of the government in Delhi is not likely to fade away anytime soon. Three, the evolving scenario, you made mention of it, General Yassin, the evolving scenario in Afghanistan, where the Biden administration has announced that it will completely withdraw from Afghanistan this September, and it has already embarked on the final pullout. In fact, ahead of May the 1st, they've already started pulling out their soldiers and their contractors. Meanwhile, as you all know, the intra-Afghan dialogue has been thrown into disarray by the Taliban's refusal to join the US-backed Istanbul conference, the peace conference that was supposed to take place in Istanbul. So I think the threat of instability on our western border looms. And this naturally is going to warrant Pakistan's urgent and priority attention. The fourth factor, of course, is the obvious one. Again, mention has been made of this before I spoke, which has to do with the pressure India has confronted vis-a-vis its border conflict with China. So I don't want to dwell on this, but clearly these are regional factors that have to be kept in view. In fact, the pressure led to an easing of tensions between China and India, and therefore the so-called Indian move to diffuse tensions with Pakistan, is perhaps part of the same sort of, it's part of the same pattern of India wanting to ensure that it is not confronted with a two-front situation, which their officials and military strategists and serving generals continue to talk about. I think one more factor we need to keep in view is, of course, an aspect of the international environment, and that is the advent of the Biden administration and its likely impact on regional dynamics. In other words, US policy towards South Asia, US policy towards Southwest Asia, which of course is Afghanistan, where they've already taken decisions. But so these are all part of a context that we have to keep in view as we look at Pakistan-India dynamics. So now let me turn to what we have been told by senior officials via the media about the back channel. So I don't want to get into speculation here because I was not present naturally. But those members of the media who were present report the following. And I will not go into a great deal of detail because I'll only pick up the more mota points because that's all that we can be sure of. One, that the back channel has been underway for some time and it is being conducted by the intelligence chiefs of the two countries. Two, that India actually reached out to Pakistan last December, and that's how the back channel really, in a way, intensified, even though the back channel link predates December. Now, this is all according to what the media has so far reported. Three, this has given reason to cautious optimism here that the Modi government is prepared to talk about all issues. I don't share that optimism, but we can return to that in the discussion. And of course, it remains to be ascertained what that actually means. India is prepared to talk about all issues. Well, India was always prepared to talk about all issues. It's how it wants to talk about Kashmir that is relevant. Because, to talk about Kashmir by starting to say, the starting point being that it's an internal matter, and therefore all they want to talk about is Azad Kashmir, well, that's hardly talking about the dispute between the two countries. So I think, I don't want to prejudge it, but this has to be ascertained as to what it means that Delhi is prepared to talk about all issues. I think we should also remember that back channel diplomacy isn't new in Pakistan-India relations. In recent history, this was utilized by the Nawaz Sharif government and the Musharraf administration for wide-ranging talks. During the Musharraf administration, you would all recall, 3 years were spent on the back channel on specifically and only Kashmir. And it was claimed at that time, and of course subsequently a very detailed book written by Khurshid Kasuri, who was the foreign minister at that time, the near agreement was reached, an agreement on Kashmir, an interim agreement, let's remember, pending a final settlement was reached, but of course this never. In the case, the recent history shows that in both cases, the back channel, this is a very important point, and we can pick this up in the discussion later. The back channel operated in tandem with the front one. So it wasn't a solo channel. There was a formal Pakistan-India dialogue, and along with it went this back channel. So this is something that we have to keep in mind. Now, in the present case, the back channel is presumed to have led to the February agreement between the DGMOs of Pakistan and India to adhere to a ceasefire on the line of control in accordance with the 2003 arrangement. Of course, this was never a formal agreement, but it was an understanding between DGMOs in 2003, which led to this ceasefire understanding. Now, of course, this February development has helped to melt the ice between the two countries after a protracted period of tensions. And the development itself came after an extended period of turbulence, which saw a spike in ceasefire violations on the line of control, as well as a rise in civilian casualties on Pakistan's side of the line. In 2020, for example, there were almost, or maybe perhaps more than 3,000 violations of the LOC by India. India claims that there were so many thousand by the Pakistani forces, but there we are. The fact was that it was a very hot line of control. The crisis, of course, in relations was triggered more recently, or not more recently, but in 2019, by India's airstrike inside Pakistan at Balakot 2 years ago. And of course, Delhi's actions, which we, other speakers have also mentioned in August 2019. Now, of course, these developments led to the complete suspension of diplomatic engagement and the downgrading of diplomatic representation. Pakistan also closed its airspace to India and seized bilateral trade. Now, tensions soared to such a record high last year that Islamabad accused Delhi several times of subversive activities to destabilize the country and seeking to contrive a false flag operation to justify aggression against Pakistan. You would recall Prime Minister Imran Khan said this many times and also tweeted about it. And other senior officials also said this. So this is the background against which we have to address the question whether broader engagement between the two neighbors can take place, and if so, on what terms. Pakistan, after all, demanded more than once, and our foreign minister has reiterated it in more recent days, that India should rescind and revoke the action that it took in 2019 before any formal talks can be considered. He has repeatedly ruled out the possibility of talks with India unless Delhi reversed the steps taken in occupied Kashmir. And the Prime Minister has also said this in the past. Of course, more recently, he's made conciliatory statements, but that doesn't alter the fact that this is a position that Pakistan took formally. Now, Delhi, for its part, has not spoken as much as Pakistan has, especially in recent weeks, but it has constantly over a period of time echoed the mantra that terror and talks cannot go together. In fact, the letter that Prime Minister Modi wrote to our Prime Minister to mark our National Day, or to, to facilitate us to on our National Day, actually also had this, negative tone, which is quite rare in a congratulatory letter of this kind, which are pretty routine actually, to say that unless there is a, he looks forward to a terror-free environment. So you can see that at least the narrative, the rhetoric, the formal positions that India takes, I have seen absolutely no change, nor have I heard a single conciliatory statement by any Indian leader or any Indian military leader, contrary to what we have heard from our side. So I think if you look at the gap of positions that the two countries have taken, I think finding common ground between these sharply divergent positions for normalization to take place, I mean, for me, it's very hard to envisage. It would be politically impossible for Pakistan to agree to formal talks or take steps to normalize relations with India if Delhi refuses to discuss the substance of the dispute of occupied Kashmir and continues to disingenuously claim that it is willing to talk, but Pakistan should vacate Azad Kashmir. I mean, this is what their leaders have said and their representatives have said often in either Geneva or in New York. So it would be well worth following what Indian diplomats continue to say. Now, of course, it may be in India's interest, it always has been, to normalize ties with Pakistan without resolving disputes and without including Kashmir in the future dialogue, to create the impression that Pakistan has accepted the August 5 action and there is no longer really any dispute over Kashmir, so we can get on with the rest of our lives. Now, the opposite is the case for Pakistan, or should be the case for Pakistan. Engagement with India or talks minus Kashmir will nullify Pakistan's long-standing position and should be unacceptable for Islamabad. The government should therefore avoid any engagement for the sake of engagement with India or normalization for the sake of normalization unless Pakistan's priority issues are also accommodated in future talks. Now, as we all know, Kashmir always figured in past dialogues and peace processes between the two countries. And you would all recall, and of course, Abdul Basit would know this in great detail, the most comprehensive framework for talks in recent history, known as the composite dialogue process, was evolved in 1997. And then it followed in a very uninterrupted way between 2004 and 2008, when the ceasefire was also observed on the LSC. And then again in 2010, although the two rounds in that year were referred to as resumed dialogue and not as composite dialogue, but as they say, what's in a name? Now, we all remember that this was structured around an agenda of 8 issues. And in these 8 issues, these 8 issues reflected the priorities of both sides, which is why the dialogue could proceed. So there was Kashmir, peace and security, terrorism and drug trafficking, Siachen, Sir Creek, Woola Barrage, economic and social cooperation, commercial rather cooperation, not social, promotion of friendly exchanges. So, this was a comprehensive agenda. And it proceeded, as I said, for several years because the agenda did reflect the priorities of both sides. I mean, for Pakistan, of course, it was Kashmir, and for India, it was terrorism. Now, it is unlikely that a similar structure can be envisioned given India's stated position on Kashmir and what it has reportedly conveyed on the back channel. Again, I'm only going by what I've read in the media, since I have no access to anyone who was involved in this back channel. The Indians are supposed to have said that, issues shouldn't be bundled up as they were in the composite dialogue. I mean, this is a trap, to my mind. I don't know what they mean by don't bundle them up. An integrated dialogue process is crucial for Pakistan to achieve in the future. But in any case, this, as I said, is something that we don't know for sure unless we know all the details of what is happening on the back channel. So I think this is where we stand with the future clouded by a great deal of uncertainty. I think, to say that there's a lot of excitement here, I don't know where the excitement is. I think amongst very serious people in this country, there is a sense of, let's understand what's happening first. This has to be a gradual process. And above all, let's not sound too overeager because that signals weakness, as if, we are desperate for a dialogue. We would like a dialogue. Of course we want peace. Which country doesn't want peace in the world? We do. But the question is peace on what terms? Peace, has to occur, which is a lasting peace, and that has to be predicated on the resolution of differences. Otherwise, it'll be, the usual pattern in Pakistan-India relations. So, I didn't know that we had to come up with actionable recommendations, but I think we can discuss this later. But I think my most important actionable, to the extent that it's actionable, recommendation would be that, take it easy, take it gradually, understand what's happening. The dynamics can change for the Modi government very quickly. Be clear who you think your negotiating partner is on the other side. And above all, seek peace with honor and not at the expense of compromising your fundamental positions on Kashmir, because then that kind of normalization will never last, and nor will it be politically acceptable to the people of Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malia. As usual, very eloquent and very comprehensive. No surprise coming from you. I think the 2 or 3 points which I would just repeat, very important that you brought out, that talks for the sake of talks should not happen, and it may be a time-gaining tactics by the Modi government. And the second thing you said was that we should beware of falling in a trap. And I would just add to your observation is that there are many parties to this trap, and I identified the Western countries and the Arab countries. You are very right that the optimism in certain quarters in Pakistan should not be lead to an excitement, and we must understand the dynamics of peace first and dialogue second. We should not take dialogue as the end, it is the means to the end. And finally, I think you have hit the nail, peace with honor. I think this should be the driving policy override in Pakistani team or the Pakistani government's stance for this dialogue. Now I will request Ambassador Basit to kindly give his views. Basit Saab.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and thank you very much, IPI, for having me. And obviously, it's an honor for me to be on the panel with Dr. Maria Lodi, which I have great admiration. And as she mentioned, we served together in London, so it was an honor for me to be her number 2 for almost 3-4 years. So thank you very much for this, for having me on this panel and for this very useful and important seminar. Almost everything has been said by General Malik as well as Dr. Lodi. So nothing really much left for me to add. But let me make 3-4 points, and perhaps that would help us to understand as to what are the present dynamics and how Pakistan should position itself. First of all, as I look at it, it's a tactical move on the part of India to reach out to Pakistan. There's no strategic, objectives remain the same as far as India is concerned. And hence, all the more reason for our side to be more circumspect in every step we take. Second, this is not the first time Pakistan and the relations have hit an impasse. As a matter of fact, our relations have been moving from a stalemate to a stalemate. We talked to each other for 3-4 years, and again, face a deadlock and then consume our energies on breaking that impasse, and then again have formally structured talks and move on. So this time too, if India has reached out to us for a variety of internal, regional, global reasons, and particularly the situation in Eastern Ladakh, it's more of the same. I am not excited at all about it, but our people somehow get euphoric and get carried away and unnecessarily get to the point where there is hardly anything to celebrate or to get excited. But this is how we are, unfortunately. My next point would be that over the years, and especially since 6th January 2004, we ourselves are to be blamed for weakening our position, principled position on Jammu and Kashmir. Whether it is the joint statement issued on 6th January 2004 or Sharm el-Sheikh statement of 16 July 2009, or 10th July 2015 statement, the joint statement issued at UFA, or 9th December 2015 joint statement issued in Islamabad. If you look at the pattern, unfortunately, our inconsistencies on Jammu and Kashmir dispute and the way we handled those negotiations have in different ways weakened our consistency on Jammu and Kashmir. And India finally on 5th August 2019 took full advantage of our inconsistencies, and it did what it had to do, as was very much reflected, contained in its election manifesto, BJP's election manifesto. So there was no surprise as far as I was concerned, because we could see that coming back in 2015, 2016. But unfortunately, we never prepared ourselves accordingly to how to counter this, how to prevent India from doing that, much less to how to really counter it once this happens. My third point is that unfortunately, over the years, Pakistan, somehow this India's narrative on terrorism has gained traction around the world, and we have not been able to counter that diplomatically very effectively. Despite the fact that we could arrest Commander Kulbhushan Jadhav with irrefutable evidence, we had not been able, unfortunately, to exploit or to convince the world that how India has been trying to destabilize Pakistan and create unrest, especially in Balochistan and cities like Karachi. So Pakistan has not been able to put up a good case to counter India's efforts or India's narrative on terrorism. So that even Jammu and Kashmir struggle, which is legitimate and allowed under international law, under the principle of erga omnes. And if you look at the human rights declaration on UN Declaration on Human Rights, or even UNGA resolution 3314 of 14 December 1974, it very clearly defines that a struggle against foreign occupation is legitimate under international law. But unfortunately, we failed on that account as well. So much so that US finally declared Hizbul Mujahideen as a terrorist organization. I do not have any problem with other proscribed organizations, but declaring Hizbul Mujahideen, which is totally indigenous, as a terror organization was a huge setback, I think, for us in the context of Jammu and Kashmir. And now Jammu and Kashmir, the struggle, nobody is, internationally at least, is ready to buy that it is not terrorism. And that is the problem which we are facing. Now, how to really move forward? I totally agree with Dr. Lodi that if we are again, if we would, kind of get inveigled into a situation where we agree to another round of formal talks, structural talks, that will take us nowhere. My emphasis at this stage is that, as very rightly underlined by Dr. Lodi as well, that ascertain as to what would be the roadmap on Jammu and Kashmir in particular, in having talks on trade or culture relations or commercial relations, or visa regime, because after 5th August 2019, things have been changed qualitatively vis-a-vis Kashmir. And if we cannot have more of the same and then to expect different results from India. As I said at the beginning, it's a tactical move on the part of India, so we need to be very, very careful whatever we do vis-a-vis India. So Jammu and Kashmir, if it is important for us, then we should be very clear that by engaging with India on the front channel at this stage, and talking on all issues as we used to do under the composite dialogue or under the resumed dialogue process, would be suicidal for Jammu and Kashmir, because India desperately needs these formal talks to resume so that it can give some legitimacy to what it did on 5th August 2019 and show to the world that everything is back to normal between Pakistan and India. So to counter, deflect that pressure, India needs these talks to resume as quickly as possible. But on the other hand, if we agree to a structured formal dialogues, whether it is the same framework as the composite dialogue or the UFA statement or the Islamabad 2015 statement, it's more of the same as far as I am concerned. We will get nothing in return, because India has taken the decision, it has made amendments to its constitution. Now it is very difficult for any government in India to revoke those amendments, frankly speaking. I do not see how BJP could do that. There is only a possibility, and I think a remote possibility, if the Indian Supreme Court declares those unconstitutional, illegal statements illegal. And for that to happen, and that cannot happen because Indian Supreme Court, I doubt very much, can muster that courage. It could only happen if it gets some go ahead from the Indian government itself. So I am not very confident that several petitions which are already pending with the Indian Supreme Court will lead to anything consequential or encouraging from the perspective of Kashmir. So for India to show its seriousness of purpose this time around, I think a few steps should be done upfront by India. And without that, Pakistan should not be agreeing to any formal talks. I would not call even this a back channel, because back channel in the past have been, as Dr. Lodi said, were not secret. There was a focal point from Pakistan side, there was a focal point from Indian side, and we knew that both the two focal points were engaged behind the scenes to arrive at some modus vivendi on Kashmir, on terrorism. Subsequently, as I'm privy to those details, I can share with you that even on the back channel, which continued till 2000, 13, 14. I think the last meeting was in 2014. That even those discussions on the back channel gradually moved from Jammu and Kashmir to terrorism. And that was very, very kind of, discouraging when I saw the record itself. India needs to take a few steps upfront in order to show that it is serious this time to handle or to address the Jammu and Kashmir disputes once and for all. For example, Pakistan should insist that it should immediately release all the Hurriyat leadership and allow them to travel abroad. This would be one step which could give us some indication that India is indeed willing this time to resolve the problem. Then India must revoke all the draconian laws, including Armed Forces Special Powers Act, Public Safety Act, Disturbed Areas Act from annexed Kashmir. Without that, I do not see how we can make the life easier for the people of occupied Kashmir. So this is very, very important from our standpoint. Thirdly, I think India should start the process of demilitarization of the urban areas in order to register its seriousness of purpose. And fourthly, I would say that India, while it cannot rescind or take back the constitutional amendments of 6th August 2019, at least some concrete steps should be taken to stop this, the process of bringing about demographic changes in occupied Kashmir. 35A is the problem for both Kashmiris and for us. But it cannot be separated, unfortunately, from Article 370, because all these constitutional articles in their Article 35A is directly linked to the abrogated constitution of Jammu and Kashmir, Article 6 of the abrogated constitution of Jammu and Kashmir, and because that was embedded in 27th April 1927 subject law of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. So all these legal provisions or legality of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, all these things are interlinked. So we need to be, India has to get all these, we need to be sure about the roadmap itself, what kind of a roadmap we have. And unless India takes these steps, concrete steps, I doubt very much that we would attain much if we will go back to a formal dialogue process. That will be inconsequential, that would take us nowhere. And we will see that we are again back to square one, unfortunately. There is much talk here about, we are looking, people are talking about the 19th SAARC summit to take place in Islamabad later this year, and then perhaps Modi coming to Pakistan and meeting our Prime Minister, and then again, on the margins of that summit, we will issue another joint statement and then resume the dialogue process. If that is the intention, that is the roadmap we are looking forward to. With due apologies, I think we are yet again being trapped into a situation where we have nothing to get in return on Jammu and Kashmir. So, in my view, Pakistan should not be very excited about hosting the SAARC summit, because in any case, SAARC is moldering. SAARC has become atrophied over the years. We have gained nothing out of that, except, to break the log jams on the margins by meeting our leaders, meeting on the margins. So nothing much has been achieved on that. Rather than, because, over the years, India has created a situation where talking to Pakistan has become a huge concession from the Indian side. And because we have been talking too much on talks that India gives us as a concession to Pakistan when it talks to us. So we need to get out of this vicious cycle. And we should not again be kind of trapped into this situation. So I would totally agree with what Dr. Lodi has very clearly said, that no talks with India, formal talks with India. Yes, we all want peace with India, but with dignity and honor. we cannot put the Jammu and Kashmir on the back burner. It's not a territorial dispute, by the way. And we cannot look the other way when state terrorism against the people of Jammu and Kashmir continues. And there is a lockdown in occupied Kashmir. People are dying. The situation there is so, I mean, it's critical, I would say, that people in Pakistan, sitting in Pakistan, have no idea as to what people of Jammu and Kashmir are going through. So after 73 years of taking a principled position on Jammu and Kashmir, we cannot simply further undermine our position simply for the reason that we want to talk with India. So that is no position in my view. We should be very, very careful. Yes, we do have economic problems, but if people are living in Pakistan fool's paradise, if they think that if our relations become normal, all our economic problems will go away. Our economic problems are not primarily because of our hostility with this adversarial relation with India. Our economic problems have other reasons as well, and nobody is willing to talk about those reasons. So if you think that by normalizing our relations, by putting the Jammu and Kashmir on the back burner, you can have a fresh start with India, you can bury the past, I don't agree with this narrative at all, frankly speaking. I think we need to move forward. Every step should be taken with utmost circumspection. We should not be taking steps in haste. We should have a very, very clear roadmap on Jammu and Kashmir this time round. And if terrorism is the issue, that is also it's an important issue for us as well. But unfortunately, we are trying to, because we have not been able to counter India diplomatically, we always find easier ways to, deflect to put onus on other or to divert attention from our diplomatic failures. What happened after 5th August 2019? I have been saying all along that we have not been able to put up a concrete, coherent diplomatic offensive against India. What happened to all those steps which our Prime Minister announced post 5th August 2019? Even we could not stand for 30 minutes to express solidarity, which our Prime Minister said he would do every week. So where all those steps have gone? So I mean, if we are not serious, if we are not consistent in taking position on Jammu and Kashmir and restrict ourselves to issuing hoary statements, which mean nothing, so then I'm afraid we will achieve nothing in the process. So my submission, very humble submission would be that we should be very careful of the Hindutva trap. Modi is not a statesman. He's hostage to his populist politics, and he's hostage to electoral politics in India. So we cannot expect anything from Modi to give us on Jammu and Kashmir. If the intention is to revive the 4-point formula, I have no issue vis-a-vis that either. But the question is that should be done in a professional manner, should be done keeping in view our long-term interests of people of Jammu and Kashmir. And let me tell you the final thing. No matter how much you invest in this relationship between Pakistan and India can never have a normal relationship, a viable peace, unless the Jammu and Kashmir issue is resolved in accordance with the aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. If the people of Jammu and Kashmir are not on board any process, that process would remain untenable no matter what you do. So it is important, as I have been emphasizing all along, that our every step must be, we take every step with great care. There is no need to be taking hasty decisions. And then there is a kind of national consensus in Pakistan on Jammu and Kashmir. So we should not be unnecessarily, doing anything which creates more problems for us and breaks that national consensus. So everything should be done taking into confidence all the stakeholders in this process. Thank you very much.
Master Vasisab, thank you very much. I think you have summed up the whole issue. And you are right that unnecessary euphoria in Pakistan is at best problematic for the Pakistani government and the entrepreneurs. You are very right also in bringing out the inconsistency in our Kashmir policy, especially during the last about 10 or 12 years, which is unfortunate from diplomatic point of view also and from political point of view. You also brought out that the global view of situation in Kashmir is very, very biased and lopsided. And there is no space for the people of Kashmir in the global view about Kashmir. And if we have to go for this back channel dialogue as being propagated, it is more of the same that we've done in the previous dialogue. SARC is a non-starter, I think, and some people were advocating, SARC as an instrument of breaking the ice between India and Pakistan. You're very right in saying that SARC is non-starter on that. And you have also echoed the same view as Dr. Malia Sahiba about all this being a trap for Pakistan. As I also brought out that India would like to behave as a bully in the region, and this dialogue with Pakistan should not be taken as a favor from India. I think the Indians are equally to gain from peace with Pakistan. And finally, I think the theory of bygones be bygones is not a good theory for Pakistan. And I think if we give up on Kashmir, tomorrow we will have to give up on a lot of things that will challenge the very existence of Pakistan. So with this, we have now opened the forum to questions. And I would request the questioners to please identify the panelists from whom they would like to ask. And the first question is from Mr. Ahmed from Lahore University. It is for both Dr. Malia Sahiba and Mr. Basit Saab. While it says, while Pakistan officials are owning the quiet diplomacy, in the absence of similar ownership from New Delhi, will it create hurdles in the way of ongoing back channel?
Should I go first, Basit?
Please, ma'am. Please.
I think it's doesn't need a very long answer, frankly. And I think we should keep our answers short so that we can get more questions in. I think you're absolutely right to notice and observe that there is Indian official silence on the back channel, whereas in our case, we have through a background briefing made it known, which kind of defeats the purpose of a back channel. But in any case, I mean, perhaps the aim was to build public support for an eventual eventual talks, perhaps with India. I don't know what the motivation is, but I don't have the full picture. But I think Indian official silence, as well as the fact that virtually nothing has appeared, there have been one or two pieces in the Indian media, because they do the same as we do, which is they brief people on background, there are news leaks, but there's been complete radio silence. And I think the aim of that is for Delhi to show that it is Pakistan that is overeager to engage with India, and that India is cool about it, but it's Pakistan that's getting, as Yasin said also, getting all excited, which is not true. I don't think everyone in Pakistan is getting excited, but that's the impression they've tried to create. So I think my short answer is, this is by design and not default.
Thank you. Basit Saab?
I think this it was leaked first in India, I think, by someone. The first story appeared in an Indian newspaper, if I recall correctly. That some back channel contact has been established between Pakistan and India. They leak, but we brief. And that is the problem. And that I agree, it is the way India has put the entire thing, there is complete silence on the part of Indian officials. And again, Pakistan is talking more about this initiative, which yet again shows that how it is Pakistan's desperation to reach out or to have these talks resumed as quickly as possible. And then every now and then, our leadership comes up with the statements. Sometimes we say that 370 is of no concern to Pakistan. We must talk about highway. We should, Pakistan, India should be doing this, should be doing that, creating an enabling environment. So, and there is complete silence in New Delhi. So this shows, how we handle our issues of importance diplomatically, and how India does. So we need to learn from us. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there was a technical hitch. Our next question is from Ali Usman from Qaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad, and it is for Basit Saab. Although I think you have answered in your talk, but yet for his satisfaction, I'll repeat the question. What should convince Pakistan that India is ready to undertake meaningful steps to create conducive environment for peace between the two countries?
I've already said that, given a few points which should give us some indication that this time round India is indeed serious and wants to resolve the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. And those include, in my view, release of the Hurriyat leadership, revocation of all the draconian laws, and then demilitarization of the urban areas, particularly the valley itself. And then also, in my view, Siachen is somehow linked with Kashmir. Because when I used to meet Ajit Doval, we would discuss Siachen and Sar Creek in particular. While there was some desire on the part of the Modi government, as I would be told by Ajit Doval, that they can move ahead on Sar Creek, but Siachen cannot be separated from Jammu and Kashmir. And here we are talking about low-hanging fruits, including Sar Creek and Siachen. Siachen, if India restores the status quo ante as was existed in 1984, that again would be a good step forward. So these are the things which India needs to do in order to establish its sincerity of purpose vis-a-vis towards Pakistan as well as to the people of Kashmir in particular. Without these steps, I doubt that we can really trust India, especially this government whose entire ideology is rooted in Hindutva, which considers not only Jammu and Kashmir, but Pakistan, even Bangladesh as part of the Putra Punya Bhumi, sacred land. And this is part of Akhand Bharat. It's not only Putra Bhumi, but Punya Bhumi. So, I mean, we understand their worldview. As I said earlier, Modi is not a statesman, so please be careful.
Thank you, Basit Saab. This is Rahim from NDU for Dr. Malia Saiba. What actionable measures should Pakistan demand from India as prior actions before moving towards revival of formal bilateral relationship or dialogue?
I think, we've already talked about what needs to be done, but I think what has to be realistic. If you're engaged, first of all, in the ice melting, which I think to some extent has melted. But, the ice has melted many times in the past also. We've had a classic one step forward, two steps backward pattern of engagement with India. But I mean, the thing is that it is only in talks that you're able to assess how much give there is in the other country's position, what are they prepared to do. If you lay out formal preconditions, there's going to be no dialogue. We've already laid out one, uh, which has been somewhat fudged in recent weeks. I think Basit alluded to that also, which is, we said we want an end, we want a restoration of India's, not India's, but occupied Kashmir's autonomous status. We want, I think there was some reference to also, obviously, demographic changes. But I think, you can't list, I mean, countries don't negotiate like that. You cannot list, because they will list, they'll come up with a list, and then there's no dialogue. It is through the dialogue that you're able to, one, assess what Basit was talking about and what I was earlier talking about too. How serious are they? If this is just a tactical move to relieve some pressure on them, then I'm sorry, we're not in the business of helping them do that. We would like a serious engagement. I think let's not mistake, our views for not wanting an engagement. Yes, we do. But what should be the nature of that engagement? So I think, I would find it, I mean, I can come up with 15 steps. And I think if you negotiations, it's very clear what we would like, where we would like to go. It's pretty clear where India would like to go. And that's what I was talking about, that at the moment, the positions are so divergent. And any expectation, because I've seen this being mentioned in at least one Indian sort of news analysis, that the Indian expectation is, now I don't know how far that's true, but Indian expectation is that Pakistan should drop, as this expression was used, drop reference to Article 370 or, the whole action that they took on 5th of August. Now, Pakistan can't do that. Although 370 was never our issue. Our issue was the self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. We never accepted the fact that Kashmir or occupied Kashmir existed in some kind of that's why we never accepted sham elections there. I mean, that's been a long-standing position. So I think Basit is right to say we got caught up in in rather contradictory statements, which reminds me of a Chinese proverb, just to lighten the atmosphere a little bit. A Chinese proverb says all trouble comes from mouth. So the less is more in diplomacy, in my opinion. I mean, that's a serious point I want to make. More often gets you into trouble. So say less, but state your substantive position. But I think listing a whole, preconditions is not going to, that's going to, it's not going to go anywhere. You can state that for the, to make yourselves happy and to make your public happy that, look, you're taking this hardline posture. But I think the main thing is you've got to be, as Basit was also saying, you've got to be clear in your mind, what is it that you seek? Don't make it public. That is what serious diplomacy is about. You don't give a statement a day or a press conference every 6 hours. I mean, what is that meant to do? How does that change anyone's opinion? I mean, Basit is right in the sense that, will it change international opinion because you've given a press conference in Multan or Faisalabad or wherever, I mean, we have to stop preaching to the converted. And I think other than the whole thing about engagement with India, look, if we resume, I mean, engagement is going on in the back channel, but it must be accompanied by a very clear and coherent diplomatic campaign by Pakistan aimed at the international community. You don't give that up because you say, well, India is interested in talking to us, and now they reached out to us in December, they talked to us, and, they're talking to us. I mean, hallelujah. I mean, so what if they're talking to you? Sure, talk to them, test them out, but don't give up the international. That's exactly what India wants you to do. What they want you to do is to suspend everything that you do on the international front. Because look, even if it's not been, let's say, effectively mobilized, let's say, the international community or your campaign has not been more effectively run. I also think it's been very on off, rather than, consistent. But remember one thing, it still did put pressure on India. It did expose India. It did not allow India to get away with what it got away with. And the reason it gets away with it is nothing to do with narrative. It's got to do with power. They are a regional power aspiring to be a global power. And in the bigger geopolitical game, countries, remain silent on Jammu and Kashmir, not because they think that the Indian sort of narrative is very effective and Pakistan's is very weak. It's because they don't want to annoy India, because they have huge equities in their relationship with India. So I think we shouldn't forget about big power politics and the way it impacts on Pakistan, India. But that does not mean that Pakistan should abandon or give up and be defeatist and say, well, nobody's listening to us, so we'd better not say anything anymore. No, carry on, because what it does at the very minimum, it raises the diplomatic costs for India in pursuing the position that it pursues. And that should be Pakistan's strategy or aim, to raise as much as possible the diplomatic costs internationally while engaging bilaterally. So please don't abandon that. If you abandon that, you weaken your negotiating position, frankly, with India. So let me end there.
Thank you, Dr. Sahaba. Very forceful and very effective, I must say. We have Mr. Yaqub Hassan from Indian occupied Kashmir, and he would like to ask a question from on the floor. Mr. Yaqub Hassan.
Yeah, am I audible, sir?
Yes, you
Hello?
are.
Am I audible?
Go ahead, ask a question.
Yeah,
Can we see you? Can we see you?
sorry? Sure.
Like to see you.
Yeah. Hello, ma'am. It's actually a bit cold, it's cloudy here, so I'm wearing the sweat and the blanket also. Sort of. Good to hear you, ma'am. Although virtually, I'm not allowed to be there. I hope so someday. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. There's a break in the signal.
Yeah, actually, yeah. देखिए, बात करने में क्या जाता है कि हम लोग बात करते हैं. So it was Nawaz Sharif who actually, it's like sort of pushed it. Let's talk that we are talking about sort of in a Kashmir. We will be having things sort of, going through the same sort of stuff again. So my question is, looking it from here, this side, and was working with one of the Indian strategic institute, interacted with Indian policymakers, decision makers, analysts, blah, blah, blah. The thinking is that there is a desperation from Pakistan side out. So another thinking is going, if they will come on the table, and it would not be like pre-2008 sort of like we talk about sort of a period or the past. So that tells us that any sort of, going like this peace process, we may not be having. It may be sort of on a trap again. It may not be that sort of willingness to resolve a sort of any issue. But as an academician, I would like to say, and the question is, what's Pakistan's Kashmir policy? It's both of this. Is it like I see the Foreign Office saying, your Foreign Minister of External saying different thing, like Army Chief saying different thing, and the Prime Minister saying altogether different thing. It has been, it's not something it's with the PTI. It has been also with the PML and with the other, political parties. So what is the Kashmir policy, and what's Pakistan's India policy? What's India for Pakistan? Is it enemy? Then you need to destroy the enemy. Is it adversary? Then you need to weaken the adversary. If it's a competitor, then you have to compete with it. What is Pakistan? What is India? If it is enemy or adversary? What I think Claeswitz or Sanzu, or for that matter John Mearsham must be laughing at you guys when the when chips are down, it's time to hit. So these are the stuff. So it was, I think, from my side. I think we have a sort of a network problem. This is sort of a disturbance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This was a comment, and coming from occupied Kashmir, I think it was very important. I also feel that Pakistan has overall failed to have an integrated policy mechanism for a long time. And it is high time, as Dr. Saib also brought out, that we have an integrated policy mechanism in place. Next, and the last question is from Mr. Sharif from Government College University, Lahore. It is for Ambassador Abdul Basit. It seems to be repetitive, but yet, would agreeing to statehood and return of normal political process in Kashmir imply that Pakistan gives legitimacy to India's fait accompli of August 5, 2019?
No, Doctor, thank you very much. Dr. Lodi made a point that we cannot set preconditions for talks. And I fully agree with you, because that has been Pakistan's position, that if you set preconditions for a dialogue process, then obviously there is no need for a dialogue. I fully agree with that. Hence, my emphasis that to keep the entire engagement process, for now at least, on the back channel. Unless you have something concrete, a roadmap, concrete roadmap as to how you would move forward in Jammu and Kashmir, there is no need for us to get engaged in a formal structured dialogue process. So I think this is important, because back channel engagement should come up as it has come up with, with the renewal of commitment to ceasefire along the LOC. So that was done on the back channel. So we need to be on the back channel. We should set these preconditions to at least have a clear roadmap as to how we would take each step on Jammu and Kashmir. When the dialogue process itself begins, then we will see. But it is important to have these preconditions in place for us to engage with India on the back channel. As for the question itself is concerned, yes, we by engaging with India formally, that would not really mean giving legitimacy to what India did on 5th August 2019. If we play our cards well, if we have a clear roadmap related to Jammu and Kashmir, then obviously we can will be having a formal dialogue from the position of strength. But if we agree to resume the dialogue process as we had done in the past, composite dialogue or resume dialogue or UFA dialogue or other dialogue, without getting anything in return concrete on Jammu and Kashmir, obviously that would be construed as something, Pakistan giving India everything on Jammu and Kashmir on a platter. So hence I am against, I oppose to any such formal engagement with India unless there is a clear roadmap on Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you.
Thank you, Basit Sahab. I will just have a query from my side also for both the panelists. We've been saying for some time in a sort of a policy or not policy that we will engage with India once it reverses 35A and 370. So is that the pivot of our relationship about Kashmir? And was that a correct stance by Pakistan? And finally, hypothetically, if India accepts these two things, so then is everything hunky-dory? Dr. Sabai, you and Basit Sahab both can give a reply.
No, it's not. It's not everything hunky-dory, because we were ready to talk to India pre 5th August 2019. So India's action, illegal unconstitutional action, has complicated the situation. So if we are saying that India should rescind these unconstitutional amendments, that makes sense to the extent that we need to go back to restore status quo ante in order to have dialogue, because we were ready to dialogue, to have a dialogue with India before India took these decisions. So there is no, I think, problem in keep pursuing that position.
I think my response to that would be that yes, once you've taken that position, you've taken that position. But I think we need more clarity, because I think our friend from occupied Kashmir made a very important telling point, which is at times we have sounded, maybe it's not intentional, it's unwitting, but at times we've sounded as if this is all we want. If they can only go back to status quo ante, everything is going to be fine. The very fact that you asked this question. At other times, we have wanted human rights violations to be addressed. At other times, we've said, it has to be self-determination for the people of Jammu and Kashmir. It's not an irredentist issue. It's not a territorial dispute. At other times, we've said UN Security Council resolutions. At other times, we've said aspirations of the Kashmiri people. So long as they're happy, that's fine, irrespective of the UN Security Council resolutions. Now, these are, these have been facets of our position. And at times, it's fine to shift emphasis. Naturally, you have to shift emphasis. If there are egregious human rights violations going on, you have to talk about them. So that's fine. But we should not appear as if we are unclear about our end state or our ultimate objective. I think our objective should remain anchored in our principled position that this is about the people whose democratic rights have been suppressed and who have been repressed for over 7 decades, and that they must decide their own destiny and their own future. And the only way that they can decide their own future and destiny is if India gives them the right of self-determination under the UN Security Council resolution. So I think, so I would say, we need clarity. We also need consistency in our diplomatic campaign. And thirdly, I think we need what Basit has been emphasizing all along, that as you enter these back channel talks, they shouldn't just be, a feel-good talks. You should be clear where you want to go with them. But the one thing I will say is that I think it's best that these talks also transition to conversations between diplomats. So although Basit thinks that there should not be formal talks, I'm of a different opinion, because I think intelligence chiefs can only break the ice, the chiefs of intelligence. I think it's best that that morphs into, once, it's created enough of a sort of atmosphere for a conversation, a serious conversation, then it should be, it should transition to those who, after all, back channel, this is the first time the back channel is being operated in this way. There were always back channel links between the intelligence of the two countries. That's not the first time. But back channel talks on issues which are intensely political and have legal connotations, legal implications for Pakistan's position. Those I think we need to transition from that to whatever the format is. I mean, I'm in favor of open talks, but whatever the format is, open or behind the scenes, backroom, they have to be handled by people appointed by the two sides, and then named by the two sides, because that shows seriousness. Otherwise, it all looks tactical. You're hiding behind the back channel and trying to talk to us. What do you want to achieve by this? ये हमें ठंडा करने का यानी कि पर्पस है, इसका एम क्या है फिर कि आप इसको ओन करते नहीं है, आप प्रिटेंड करते हैं, आप बात ही करने को तैयार नहीं है हमसे, आप हार्डलाइन आपने पोजीशन इख्तियार की हुई है, आप हमें मिलाइन करते हैं हर इंटरनेशनल फोरम में जाके और फिर कहते हैं आप हमारे साथ पीस चाहते हैं. It's so that's why I'm saying it's also contrary to some of their actions. So I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Seva. Let me first of all admit myself. Both the panelists have added to my education. I stand educated and very clear on the issue to start with, and I'd like to thank you. I'd just like to, sum up 2 or 3 points from both the panelists. The most significant point is that talks for the sake of talks should not happen. And talks for the sake of talks lead into a trap. And that trap will only be costly for Pakistan. India doesn't lose anything. And we may be, at some time, we maybe have to save our face. And I think the last point Dr. Saba brought out is very important. Most of our back channel diplomacy earlier, that's why it's known as diplomacy, was done by diplomats or a mix of teams. So rightly so, I think this art should also transition, remain as back channel, but transit to maybe a diplomatic forum. We have to be very cautious of the dynamics, why India wants or is wanting. Does it want a back channel, or it wants a back channel and accuses or projects us as to be, dying for a back channel dialogue? I think that's a very important point brought out. Unless they own this back channel like Pakistan has done, we seem to be with a begging bowl for peace. And as far as Kashmir is concerned, ad nauseum repetition that our policies have not been consistent, and that is led to the Indian sort of obstinacy on the issue, and ultimately the loss of life for the Kashmiri people and their darkening of their future. With this, I'd like to conclude. I'd like to thank Dr. Saba for sparing her time, and Ambassador Basit also for being with us, although you're sitting in Islamabad, so we can, you're near Iftar. Thank you very much, and I must congratulate IPI for a very timely discussion on a very important issue faced by Pakistan and most talked about in literate as well as illiterate circles of Pakistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, friend.